From May 25th until June 9th, Google pushed out their latest broad core update. And like most broad core updates, there are winners, there are losers, and there are a lot of SEOs and site owners running around in a bit of a panic. But unlike a lot of their broad core updates, Google didn't seem to be targeting any one specific thing. Like last June, the Core Web Vitals update. In that update, it was something really specific, but this time there wasn't a specific target. There doesn't seem to be a lot of rhyme or reason to who won and who lost. So today we're going to get right into it. I'll break it down for you based upon what I have seen and share some things that you can do now to help recover and grow your traffic, as well as to minimize the impact of future algorithm updates. Let's start by looking at what Google had to say about the update. I mean, best to go right to the source, right? That's it. That's everything that Google provided us. They say several times a year they make substantial improvements to their ranking processes. It takes 1 to 2 weeks to roll out. This gray box here, this is particularly important. Google here is acknowledging they know that when they push out these broad core updates, it's going to have a notable impact on what shows up in search, and that's going to impact your site, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. They also say here that there's not necessarily anything wrong with pages that perform worse after the update. It doesn't mean they violated the webmaster guidelines or that they've been subject to any sort of action, manual or algorithmic action against their site. No penalties and things like that. Instead, it talks about how they try to improve the way that their algorithm accesses the information and how it accesses the content, and basically how they figure out what should rank where. And so when they make a change to the algorithm, it's going to change what ranks where, and that's all they're saying is happening. So when we go running around trying to fix what we did wrong on our website, we may find that there's nothing to fix at all. And that is probably one of the scariest things that you can possibly hear if you just got a traffic hit. So before we talk about this specific update, I want to talk to you a little bit about what to look for when you do see your site get hit in a way that seems algorithmical, right? Where you lost traffic, it ties up with an algorithm update. Let's talk about what to look for. Probably the first place I like to go when there's been an algorithm update or when I notice that there's been a drop in traffic is Google Analytics. There's a ton of stuff that we can see here within Analytics. This is one of our sites. It's one we bought a while back. We announced it here on this channel when we did. We've recently added a bunch of content, so we should see the traffic really start to pick up. I'm gonna look here by page views, and what we're gonna see here is right there. See that? That's May 25th. That's the day the update started. And we did see a drop in traffic between about 15 to maybe 20%, depending on what you consider the baseline to be. So it is there, it's noticeable. But that alone is obviously not that helpful. It's just, okay, I lost some traffic. So what I like to do next is I like to look at page by page. Where did I actually lose the traffic? I'm gonna look here though under behavior to the site content, and I wanna see all pages. Basically, I wanted to list out for me over this same time frame, the traffic by page. And what we see here on this site is there are a handful of articles here that make up, let's see, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25% of the traffic comes from 6 pages. One of them is the home page, which, you know, I'm hardly even going to count. So I'm going to look at the very first one. This is my top ranking article. So this one, if it dropped, it's going to have a noticeable impact on the site. And we could say we were averaging probably a little bit below 20 before. Actually seems a little more stable since, with a few bigger dips here after. But it did drop. I mean, you can see a line kind of where it's at before, and the line's a little bit lower after, right? This one, I think it'd be a little bit harder case to make that it had a drop. Here's the next one. This one, again, I think it'd be a really hard case to say that this one dropped. So it looks like that very top article did have a bit of a drop. It doesn't account for all of the traffic loss across the site, but it accounts for some. And that is gonna be noticeable because this isn't that big of a site. So now we need to try to figure out why that dropped. For that, I like to go to Google Search Console. When you get to Search Console, you see here the overview page, and look, we can see this. This is web search clicks, and we see that, you know, where we were at before, and boop, right there after the 25th, we had a bit of a drop. I'm gonna click on that report, and it's showing me the top queries. If I go to Pages, I can find this one, Datanoid Beecher Care. Now, this isn't showing me total page views, it's showing me only the organic clicks, which is actually helpful. There's a discrepancy between the number of clicks I got versus the overall page views I got, and that makes sense because I get page views that come from other sources. Many of them come and click through internal links on the site. So if I click on this one and then I go back to queries, I can see the search queries, the words that people are typing in that I'm ranking for. So now what I have is like about 20 days before and 20 days after, I can do kind of an apples to apples comparison and see what search phrases this article is ranking for, where my clicks are coming from and where my impressions are. This is the before, dinosaur beacher after. Okay, I got a similar number of clicks. I went from, in this case, 8 to 5, but it's the impressions is what I'm looking for. I wanna see how many times did this show up here in Google search for that particular search query. And I went from 2,600 impressions to 2,400 impressions, a couple hundred impressions difference. It amounted for a difference of a few in the clicks. And honestly, that to me it probably is just a regular statistical variability. A difference of a couple hundred impressions and 3 clicks is clearly not what we saw drop on that particular article. One thing that we can easily look at to see this kind of high level, and of course this number is going to vary from week to week. If we scroll down, we can see that there were, the 20 days leading up to the algorithm update, 462 different searches that we were showing up under. In the 20 days since, there are 419. So 23 of the search queries that I was ranking for in the 20 days leading up to the algorithm update, I no longer rank for. Now, each one of those may be getting, some of them getting 0 clicks, some of them getting 1 or 2 clicks. And when we total that up, it may account for a substantial amount of the drop in traffic. Also, when we consider that some of the traffic to this article comes from interlinking from other articles, if some of those other articles lost rankings for some of their search queries, then it would make sense that the overall traffic to the article would drop. And this, when we see it happening spread out across the whole site, that's noticeable. That's gonna have an impact on the overall traffic. But one thing that's really telling to me is that the number one search phrase that the number one article is ranking for, the number of impressions is pretty dang close. It's certainly not a 15 to 20% drop. The reason I'm looking at them is to try to figure out what happened. And notice that it took me 20 days to be able to have enough data to be able to draw any sort of conclusion. If I start drawing conclusions after a day or 2 or even a week, I'm probably gonna get to work doing something that may have no impact on my site. We'll run around, we'll spin our wheels, and we'll do a ton of work, working ourselves into a frenzy for nothing, and potentially impact our site in a negative way because we're making changes without having any data to back them up. So in this update, what did we see? The first one is that snippets kind of got a little bit of a shuffle. Some sites that had a lot of snippets now have 0 or have fewer snippets. This is actually not something that I believe to be unique to this algorithm update. This is actually something that I've seen happening since about last June or July, where a site will have a whole bunch of snippets and then out of nowhere, it loses all of them. And when Google pushes out an algorithm update, it seems to sort of trigger a shuffle to happen. And so sometimes one site will lose all of its snippets, which can account for a fairly substantial drop in traffic because they moved maybe to position 2 or 3 and don't quite get as many clicks. But again, this is something that we just need to account for. We need to know that that's gonna happen from time to time, that some of our articles are gonna move from position 1 to 2 to 3 or 4 or back to 2. We don't wanna be dramatically making changes when we see that happen. If we lose a snippet, we don't want to immediately jump in and try to fix our snippet so that we're going to win again. The second thing we saw is one that I just alluded to in the beginning, and that is a loss of rankings for some of our tangential search queries. You see, every article that we write, we typically have at least one search query in mind that we're trying to rank for. It's kind of the point of search analysis. Identify things people are searching and then write content that can win for that. But in the process of doing that, we often end up answering numerous other questions that people have. And so we rank for some of those other questions, even though that wasn't the focus of the article. Google just said that when they do these algorithm updates, including this one in particular, one of the things they're doing is improving the way they access content across the web. The way they access and index that content, the way they analyze it to be able to figure out what it actually says. And as Google improves their semantic understanding of searches and of the content on the web, they're able to identify resources that may be a better fit for that search query. So what happens is You may have been getting traffic for an article you wrote where your article barely even answers the question that somebody else had, but you got the traffic anyway. But it turns out somebody else answered that question better, and Google just didn't realize it till now. That happens so much, and when we see that happen across, in my case, where I lost like over 20 of the search queries that one article was ranking for, they're all small. They're not things I ever intended that article to rank for. But I lose a little bit of that traffic, and you spread that out across your whole site, and you lose traffic. You lose enough to be noticeable. I have said before, and I stand by this, the way that we do search analysis, the way we write our content, really the way that we approach SEO, it helps us to stay ahead of algorithm updates because we're not trying to chase them. We're not trying to game the test. We're not cheating on the test. We're not trying to just get through it. We're studying for the test. We're creating our content in a way that it passes the test, the intent of the test. It's like if you tried to spend forever figuring out how your teacher in school decides which of the multiple choice letters to choose, A, B, C, or D, right? Maybe they kind of have an algorithm for the order they tend to choose, and it's really, really complicated, and you spend all your time figuring out their algorithm instead of actually studying the material for the test. If you study the material for the test, you stay ahead, you end up passing the test, okay? That is what we do. We create content that passes the intent of what Google's trying to do in search. However, this doesn't guarantee that you'll never lose traffic when an algorithm update happens because of things like we just talked about. All right, the next one is shifts in the SERPs across commodity content. There's so much blog content being created today that is commodity content. We call it commodity content because it does not matter which website you go to, it's all the same. We create commodity content whenever we use an AI to write the entire blog post. We create commodity content whenever we use other people's blog posts to do all of the research for our blog posts. If you don't add anything of additional, unique, original value in the content you create, your content will be commodity content. And Google just has to decide between these different articles which one to put up because they all basically say the same thing. And so then the only metric that they can use to compare them is authoritativeness, and well, whoever's better at link building may just win that game. But when we have original value, when we have unique content, when we do original research, our content is no longer commodity content. And that is the way that we can stay ahead and keep our top ranking even when Google shuffles things around. When the algorithm changes, it's going to shuffle things, especially if the things that are being shuffled are basically indistinguishable. So don't create content that can't be distinguished from other content on the web. Create something original and unique, and you won't have this problem at all, or at least not nearly to the extent that most people are facing today. Okay, so if you did lose traffic, there are 3 steps that you can take that are gonna help you regain traffic, grow your site, and avoid this kind of a problem in the future. The first one is if you find specific search queries that you lost, but that you know are valuable, meaning you lost that search query and that lost you quite a bit of traffic, well, then we need to create content on our website that's actually catered to that specific search query. This is particularly the case when you lost a tangential search query, one of those ones you weren't intending to rank for specifically, but you ranked for kind of by happy accident. Now let's go ahead and craft some content that caters to that specific search query so you can win it back. The next step is if you find that you lost some snippets, it's time to just keep moving forward. It doesn't mean don't write answer targets. It just means we keep writing new content. What we don't want to do is chase specific snippets. Snippets are changing all the time. Google's regularly sort of shifting who wins what snippet. And if you chase it, it may turn out that you change your snippet to something that's actually worse. Or it could be that you change that answer target so that you can try to win the snippet, but you've changed it too much. And Google doesn't like the change that you made, and it impacts the ranking of your article. We don't want to make really reactive changes. If you wrote a good answer target, keep it as it is. There's a good chance that you'll get that snippet back one of these days. The third one is to focus on creating original, unique content. One of the ways we do this is by doing things differently than most people. Most content creators are looking for shortcuts. When they want to write an article, they take the main search query, they write a headline that's basically the search query with something sensational to add on top of it. Then for their subheadings, they go to that search query, take the people also ask section and turn all those into the subheadings. And many times they don't even change the wording. And so what do we get? Well, we get a whole bunch of articles that have all the same subheadings. They're all saying the exact same thing with a little bit different wording throughout the blog post. Well, don't do that. Instead, take the search query that it is, use your own brain, use your own experience to come up with what are the things, what are the parts of this issue. And that way you can create articles that are unique, that are different from what everybody else is doing. The point of this is that you should stop looking for just shortcuts to make it super easy and super reproducible by somebody else. You see, a lot of people are looking for that sort of repeatability, and so they might just give that sort of instruction to their writers. Say, hey, here's the primary search query, go look it up, go to the people also ask section, use those as the subheadings, and go write an article filling that in. I like to do some research on the topic before I write my subheadings. I do that first 20, 30 minutes of research to make sure I understand the topic well enough, and then I can come up with my own ideas for subheadings. The people also ask can be a guide, but it absolutely should not be the rule. At our Content Warrior writing service, our writers are instructed on several ways that they can do original research so they can find high quality information without having to rely on just other people's blogs. We've actually recently grown our team and have more availability than ever before. So if that's something that interests you, you need to get more content on your site, I invite you to go check out contentwarrior.com. I'll put a link in the description below. And for all of you, I wish you the best as you work on growing your website. Coming out of an algorithm update can be one of the most frustrating times for a content creator. I totally get it. And even if you're doing everything right, sometimes you're going to see fluctuations in traffic. It happened on one of our sites. It happens all the time. It just doesn't necessarily mean you did anything wrong. It just means it's time to get to work, keep creating content, and in the end, you're going to do awesome. Just, try not to shortcut it too much. Try to create something original, something valuable, something that you can be proud of, and something that's really helpful to other people. And your content, it's gonna stand out. It's gonna be the best. We'll see you all next time.